Hey everyone, it's Alex, and we've got a Marvel Snap Zabu deck guide for you for Pool 1 and 2 players here today. Basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be featuring 6 individual decks, one of which is going to counter Zabu, 5 of which will utilize Zabu, and this is pretty interesting because the card is very powerful. So whether or not you have the season pass or you don't, you're going to find something of value in this video. Moreover, at the end of this video, I'll link the Pool 3 list that I made as well. Again, all these lists are very experimental. The expectation is that you use them as launching points to help you start deck building with Zabu, and as the meta starts to kind of adjust and more kind of like priority deck lists start to become developed, I will update the channel and you'll see additional posts about Zabu, and of course in my meta decks of the week video. So with that being said, let's get started with deck number 1. Deck number 1 is a Devil Zabusaur deck for Pool 2. Now, I still stand by that I think that Devil Dinosaur has one of the best synergies with Zabu. The reason for this is because Zabu is a card that minimizes the cost of your 4-cost cards. Now, if you look at what Devil Dinosaur does, you have 2 primary 4-cost cards that really amplify Devil Dinosaur. You have, obviously, the White Queen, which is an extremely high power card that also gives you scouting information and an additional card in your hand. But most importantly, it's the Moon Girl. Moon Girl allows you to inexpensively replicate your Devil Dinosaur, and then what you get to do is not only do you get a decent 4/4 body, but you get 2 Devil Dinosaurs, a massive full hand, which allows you to basically play Devil Dinosaur on 5 and on 6, while also playing additional power with regards to the White Queen on the turn that you play Moon Girl because of Zabu. It's an incredibly effective list. You also have the Electra because you want to counter a lot of the sunspots that you'll be seeing in Pool 2. This list is not particularly, susceptible to Killmonger, despite it taking out Electra, Agent 13, and Iceman. The nice thing about these 1-drops, if they happen to drop Killmonger, each one of these cards provides value in a different way based on its effect, other than the board state and the power it provides. So this is overall a very good deck list for Pool 2. Continuing with the Pool 2 deck list, we have something called the 2-lane Zabu, and basically the way this works, it is essentially a modified Sunspot Infinite list for Pool 2 that utilizes Warpath in order to ensure that you can very effectively trade 2 of the 3 lanes. You are effectively leaving one of the lanes completely absent, and what you do is you have 2 different win conditions. The first is to utilize Zabu in conjunction with Jessica Jones, Warpath, and White Queen to completely overvalue one particular lane. And then what you can do, if you've played Sunspot into a lane prior, you can then basically skip turn 5 and play your Infinite. If you do not have the capabilities of playing Infinite, what you then can do is you can use your Zabu on turn 6 to play 3 additional 4-cost cards, because they'll be costing 2 each, which allows you to play 3 with 6 mana. They also have the ability to lane correct with Storm. You have the Sunspot Armor Storm combination in conjunction with Jessica Jones in the event that you don't pull your Zabu. This is one of those decks that kind of like does 2 things, but doesn't really focus on any one thing. It has the effective play of using Warpath, which even if you just play him into, if you have a 3rd lane that's occupied, he's still a 4/5, which isn't terrible, but ideally you want Warpath to get the additional +4. Because when you do that, that lane is extremely difficult for the opponent to contest, especially if you're able to skip turn 5 and play an Infinite in the other. That's a lot of power that most opponents in Pool 2 simply can't deal with. Now, I really like this list for Pool 2 because I think Strong Guy is one of those cards that people often like kind of forget exists in the game. It's a card that really becomes a 4/10 if you're able to empty your hand, which is kind of challenging, honestly. Like, it's not exactly easy. However, what's amazing about Zabu specifically is the fact that your 4-cost cards suddenly become these Zoo-style cards that you can utilize to good effectiveness, specifically in conjunction with someone like Strong Guy. So the idea here is to have a very, very early tempo play style deck where you're able to play lots of 1s and 2s early, a 3 in Zabu, and even if you don't have Zabu, you're able to just kind of zoo out your cards as required. You're able to use Jessica Jones and basically ensure that, you're able to secure one location, a lot of power for a 4-cost card. You also have the Khazar, which is a great value card considering the amount of 1-drops you have. The key consideration here is that you don't have a play on turn 5. What you actually do on turn 5 is you basically play as much as you can with Zabu and your 4s, but most importantly, the card you have to play on turn 5 is generally Blade. The reason for this is because if you have a leftover card in your hand, Blade will discard that card to ensure that your hand is empty, which allows you to draw America Chavez on turn 6. With the America Chavez draw on turn 6, you're guaranteed to be able to play Chavez with an empty hand, and Strong Guy then becomes a 6 additional power card. That's kind of the main synergy. It's important you understand that Blade has to be Blade on turn 5. Do not play him on turn 1. Don't play him on turn 2. You hold Blade for turn 5. So essentially you have Zabu out. You can play 2 4-drops because again they cost 2 in conjunction with Blade. That's a total of 5 energy, which empties your hand and allows you to play the Chavez and keep your hand empty for Strong Guy. That is essentially how this is played. Alternatively, if you're in a situation where you can't empty your hand on turn 5, you could theoretically empty your hand on turn 6 and discard the Chavez with Blade, and then ultimately proc your Strong Guy. That's an alternate win condition as well. Overall, I do think this deck is a really high skill deck to pilot, but once you get the hang of it, you're going to crush guys with this list. We just finished speaking about a Pool 2 variation of the Strong Guy Zabu list, and I'm going to provide you with a Pool 1 variation as well, because I do think these lists are very good. So much like what I just explained prior, but if you're in Pool 1, you might have just skipped here anyways. Essentially, the idea here is that you have Strong Guy who can become a 4/10. And what you want to do is on turn 5, you want to basically have Zabu out on turn 3, and on turn 5, you're able to play, basically your Khazar and your Strong Guy. You're also able to play Jessica Jones as well, but just be aware of the on reveal effect that you can't follow up in that specific lane. What you want to do then is on turn 5 is you're able to play 2 of these because of the discounted cost. So you have 5 energy, you play 2 cost 4 drops, which is kind of hard to say, it's like a tongue twister, and the 5th energy you use to play Blade. This allows you to discard whatever remains in your hand. You should only have 1 card remaining. That allows you to draw consistently. America Chavez is the only card in your hand on turn 6, which means when you play Chavez, you're getting 9 power on the board, and Strong Guy, because the hand is empty, gets the +6. So it's actually a ton of power. It's a 15 power play on turn 6. So this is how it's played. Alternatively, if you're not able to dump your hand, you're able to play Blade on turn 6, discard someone like the Chavez, and drop your other cards in conjunction with Strong Guy to get that +6, which a lot of players don't account for when they're doing their maths. Anyways, this is the Pool 1 variation of the Strong Guy deck, and if you are from Pool 1, I just covered the Pool 2 one, so skip back and see how that deck list gets adjusted for people as you start to experiment in Pool 2. If you're in Pool 1, you're probably very used to playing Zoo lists. Well, there's a Zabu Zoo list as well, but I do think that this one is not quite as good as the Strong Guy list. The reason for this is because in Pool 1, you really want to focus on having the most value on the board as possible while trying to avoid Killmonger in early Pool 2, which is what Armor does. The problem with this list is that you have Zabu, and it's kind of forced in there because you really only have 2 4-cost cards. So assuming that they're both in your hand on turn 4, you basically play Zabu on 3, you're able to play 2 cards on turn 4, so basically you get the double up. Turn 5 you play Blue Marvel, then you have the Onslaught, which is good. Alternatively, if you don't have both Jessica Jones and Khazar, you play Khazar and you have 2 extra mana to play, Armor or Korg Nightcrawler or whatever in order to give additional value on the board. You follow that up an individual lane with Khazar, Blue Marvel, Onslaught, and suddenly your entire board gets buffed quite a bit. It's kind of one of those deck lists that can test 3 different ones. I do think Strong Guy is better, but if you are really having fun with zoo-based lists, this is one that you could consider as well. The nice thing as well is that as you start to unlock additional 4-drop cards, you could consider subbing out someone like Jessica Jones. Khazar is not subbable. You could even get rid of someone like, I guess you get rid of someone like Hawkeye to add an additional 4, but then again, I feel like it's kind of reaching and trying to force Zabu a little too much. But I did want to show you this list. I think this is one of the ones that needs a little more experimentation, but as time goes on, I'm sure a lot of players will start to figure out how to utilize Zabu in Pool 1 zoo lists. Alright, so this next deck list is for gamers out there that either don't have Zabu, want to counter Zabu, hate Zabu, or just didn't buy the season pass. This is what you're going to do, and there's a couple things I need to kind of talk about with this list, and I'll let you guys discuss in the comments other ways that you guys can develop counters for Zabu, because Zabu's in a really interesting spot in the early pools. It's actually very difficult to counter, and I'll explain why. You're thinking, Alex, you got a counter list here. What do you mean it's not that great? Well, it's not that great for a specific reason, and it's that if you have Zabu, right, it comes out on turn 3 as a 3/2. The only way that you can counter in Pool 2 is by using Sandman, generally speaking. You can also utilize Enchantress, which is a 4/4 body. Those are the 2 primary counters. Enchantress is actually probably better because you get the 4/4 counter, you actually play on turn 4, and you take out the Zabu effect. The problem with Sandman, and although I like it, if they don't get Zabu out on turn 3, like if they don't get the card draw, definitely play Sandman. But the problem is if they play the alley cat here, Zabu, what's wrong with me? Anyways, if they play Zabu on turn 3, that means you're playing Sandman on turn 4, right? And Sandman's a 4/1. They are potentially playing two turn 4 cost cards. So like your 1 power 4 play is like not going to be enough for their double up Zabu play, and you're just going to be way behind. So that's why a lot of the counter lists that currently are trying to combat Zabu are using Psylocke to get the Sandman out on turn 3, but this is a pool 3 card that I can't reliably say that you have. So that's why the counter lists are very tricky. So generally speaking, what you want to do is you want to play Sunspot, Armor, Lizard, Storm in one lane so that you have like a very strong presence, and then that allows you to effectively win the next lane with a turn 5 skip, ramp up the Sunspot, and play Infinite in the other lane. It's very hard in pool 2 for them to counter that. The best counter is actually Enchantress, because Enchantress can come out on turn 4 on top of the Zabu, and essentially, I said it again, Zabu, on top of the Zabu, but also still be a 4/4 power as opposed to the Sandman. Now, I'm including Sandman here because if they don't play it on turn 3, then it's a very good counter. But just be very aware that this list is like very challenging to pilot because Zabu is actually a little overtuned right now. I think it's going to get nerfed, but this counter list does do the job. However, it's very much worth noting that Sandman is only effective if Zabu is not out yet. If it's going to be coming out on turn 4, you suspect. That is when you play Sandman. Alternatively, if it's played on turn 3, you want to counter it with the turn 4 Enchantress. But bear in mind, they're already going to be playing multiple cards now because Zabu's already on the field of play. The fact that it's a 3-drop is really what makes Zabu so strong, and in particular in Pool 2, difficult to counter. I hope this explanation helped. And if you want to see another video, it's down below. That's going to be a Pool 3 kind of like early day 1 style deck list video that you can use to try to get an idea of like what else is going on with Zabu and how else you can deck build around him. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next Marvel Snap video.